Hey there, welcome back to my build of this LDO Voron 0.2 kit. I've noticed on YouTube that the videos for the last couple of episodes of this build have gotten a little bit more traction. So if you're new and you've just joined us in the series, welcome and thanks for watching. If you've been watching for a while, thank you as well. It's been a great, fun build process so far, and we're actually getting pretty close to the end of the process, at least as far as the mechanical parts of the printer go to get it printing. Then we've got the electronics to do. And again, just to remind us all, the goal here is to tune this little printer up to print with as high of quality and detail as I possibly can. So we're going to build the base printer, then we're going to go through and do a bunch of tuning and testing with it to try to get it to print really highly detailed parts, mostly for mecha model kits that I want to build that are things I would normally print in resin, but I would like to try printing them with, just a regular filament printer and see if I can get the quality. It's never going to be perfect up to the level of a high quality resin printer, but I think we can get it pretty close. So we're going to see how that goes. For today though, I'm going to move this printer out of the way. That's the state that we left it in at the end of the last episode, because today on the desk we have all of the parts that we need for our print head, and that's what we're going to be working on today. So we've got all of our fans and our extruder motor and a bunch of the mechanical electronic parts over here. We've got all our printed parts over here. These are all standard. These are all just things that came with our LDO kit. This printed part for the main body of the tool head here, I did print some extra little inserts that are a different color that are just super glued in place here. So I'll leave a link to the printables.com listing for these little printable inserts down in the description below. So if you're interested, you can do that. But that was simple. Just print those and drop them in place and stick them down with a little bit of super glue. Other than that, everything is just standard with what comes with the LDO kit. And as usual, up here in the corner, we're going to put the instructions as we go along. And we'll start with this page number 157 right here. Now again, I've done all of the heat set inserts ahead of time. So this is showing those. I've already got them in place. And it is showing those two printed spacers down in the lower right corner of this page of the instructions, which we do not need to print or to deal with because our LDO kit came with these nice little metal ones instead. So that is one change from the standard instructions there. On this page, we have all of the heat set inserts in place, but there is a little tiny screw. It's this M2x6 here that needs to go and be threaded up into this little spot right here. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'm not sure how snug this needs to be, like how flush up against the surface. This is for an adjustment that we can make later on for the tension on our filament. So I'm not going to tighten it super tight. I'm just going to kind of get it snug down there, and then we'll see how that goes. On the next page, they want us to prepare our idler gear here on its little metal axis rod using these little bearings here, and it wants us to lubricate these bearings. So I have pre-set or grabbed some of the Mobilux EP1 grease that I used for lubricating the linear rails, and I'm going to just put a little bit of that on here as we put these bearings in place. Just using this toothpick here. And then this slides on top. Just work that around a bit to get the grease nice and spread out. Alright, very good. And now that should snap into this part, right? With an orientation like so. I'll get you a bit of a closer view as we go here. Yep, and that just snaps down in place like that. It's moving nicely. Now, over here, there's actually a tiny bit of plastic that got in these teeth, so I'm going to clean that out. That's looking good. I also build model kits on this same build surface, and so I think I had a couple little bits of plastic left over from trimming something yesterday. and it got on these parts, but there we go. So they want us to measure to make sure that the amount of the shaft here that's protruding from the gear is less than 3 millimeters. I've already done that. That is fine. And they also want us to make sure that these bearings both fit on the two ends, and I've done that as well. They're perfectly fine. So there's no adjustments we need to make on that page based on the instructions on that page. So we can go ahead to here where we start to press these bearings into place, right? So we've got this one here. I'm not sure how tight the fit here is going to be. It feels like it might be fairly tight. So I'm going to be very careful here to press this down perfectly straight. I may have to go out and grab my vise that I have out in my garage to get this pressed into place. So yeah, I'll just show you here. We're going to line this up like so, and we've got our hex nut that is going to go in there. And both of those are press fit into place. The hex nut is fine, but I don't want to press on the bearing too much without making sure I'm applying even pressure, because I don't want to damage the rotation of it. So I'm going to go do that off camera, and I'll be back in just a minute with that in place. Actually, looking ahead, I think there's also a bearing. Yeah, the other one has to go into here. No, here. Right. Right down in there. So while I'm working on one, I might as well work on both. So I'm going to go and press both of those into place, and then we'll be right back, and we'll continue on with the build once those are ready to go. And I'm back. We've done it. These are both nicely seated in here and nice and flush and ready to go. This one especially was quite difficult, right? Because it's kind of recessed inside of this little area here. And so I had to find a cylinder that was a good enough size that it would fit in there, but still cover the surface of the bearing from the side there. And we got that taken care of. So everything looks good there. Once again, I've got a tiny bit of plastic that managed to find its way into that one, so let's clean that out. All right, and we are now ready, I believe, to start putting some of these other pieces in place according to how the instructions have them arranged here. So this is our shuttle, and it goes like so. And then the guidler, which is this piece that we've already put our little extruder gear into, goes in this way, right? And then the latch, which is a duck, right? It's not my imagination. That is definitely a duck or a goose of some sort. It goes up here like so. And then, next page, we take our mid-body part here, and this is going to fit right down over the top here, and then we are going to attach it into place with these 3 M3 by 25 screws. And the instructions do note that this one down here at the bottom will, we need to be careful about the tightness of it, because it actually also serves as the hinge for this piece here. So let's go ahead and put that together, make sure it snaps together nice and tightly. Yeah, that fit is very good. And we'll just tighten these down. Alright, just making sure now that this guidler can still move in and out with this screw here, that we haven't tightened it too much, and it seems good. Actually, I might need to tighten it just a little bit more, because I noticed there was a little gap here. So I want to make sure that those two parts are nice and held together. Yeah, that was too much. So let's split the difference. Very good. All right. So we are set there, and then we want to put 2 M3 by 10s, which are these guys here, into these 2 holes here to hold that piece in place even a little bit better. All right, there we are. Feels nice and solid. And so next, we want to grab this big gear, and this goes this way. And then we're going to put a grub screw in here. And these grub screws came preloaded with thread locker on them already from the kit. So even though the instructions are telling me to make sure I add that, I don't need to. And the idea here is we want to tighten this down so that it's on the flat of this shaft here, but we don't want to tighten it all the way. Right? So I'm going to tighten this down so that this won't spin, but it has some motion side to side, but it's not going to move any further than that, right? Because it's captured against the flat of the shaft. And I believe we're going to tighten it down the rest of the way in just a minute here once we get the alignment of this filament path all figured out. All right, so we skipped the part of this step where we actually put this in place, right? So we're going to slide this down through here, just like so. And then on the next page, we can put this back plate on. And it's going to go this way with that bearing over the other end of the shaft here. Just kind of checking and pressing this down all the way around to make sure that I've got a nice tight fit everywhere. Looks like it's going to be good. So we put this in place with two M3x6s. They go down here in this corner and then up here as I drop them everywhere. And then one longer M3x10, which is this one, and that'll go in that corner. So I'm going to go ahead and thread all three of those into place. All right, that's snugged down nice and tight into place now. I'm just making sure that this gear still turns freely. It looks good to me. We might be checking that on the next step anyway. We are. All right, so for the next steps, we need to ensure that the 50-tooth gear is not rubbing on any of the plastic parts. It seems like it's not already, but I will follow this and make sure that we do what they say. So they want me to measure and or look to make sure we have a gap over here on this side of this gear of about 0.75 millimeters, which seems fine. Yeah. And then, while the gear is centered, open the guidler and loosen the grub screw. So what we'll do is open this up, and yeah, I can barely see the grub screw down through there. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get you a camera angle where you can see that. Yeah, it seems like it's going to be tough. You see that shiny stuff down in there? That's our extruder gear, and I can see the grub screw down in there. So what they want us to do is put a piece of filament down through the filament path, and I've grabbed a piece of the white filament that we were using, or that we had been using to print some of the white parts on this thing. So I can insert that down there. I can see it pretty well, and what they want me to do is adjust this until I am seeing that filament running correctly down through the filament path and right through the middle of that extruder gear. So that's looking good to me. We'll go ahead and tighten the grub screw down, then just double checking it again to make sure that everything is lined up very nicely. Yep, that looks good. Okay, next page, we're going to put our tension spring in. I suppose that they want us to close this back up again, right? So I did tighten this screw here tight enough that this latch is a bit tight to move. I may go back and loosen that up just a touch. I'm actually kind of okay with it being like that for now. So we'll go ahead and tighten this tensioner down. And not a ton, right? Just enough that it starts to compress that spring. That should be good. Now they show us what it should look like inside, which obviously we can't see, but I can tell that all the parts are meshing together correctly just because of how it fits. I guess you could tell by the angle of this tension screw coming out, right? You want it to be straight horizontal. If it's leaning back down this way, then you'd be in trouble. And then they're reminding us about the anti-squish thingamajig, which is that little screw we put in place way back at the beginning. It is down in here, right there. And I could potentially tighten or loosen that, as it says here, to adjust the amount of that those two gears can come together to grab onto the filament. So for the moment, I'm going to leave it as it is, and we are going to check the filament path again. And what I'm going to do is just run this gear. Yeah, so I'm already too tight. Let's loosen this out. We've got a good hold on the filament here. And I can turn the gear. It's a bit hard to do because it's hard to reach in here and turn the gear, but I can turn the gear and I can see the filament moving nicely, which is great. I do see some teeth marks on the filament from the gear as well, and I'm not sure if it's too much. I have a second piece of filament here. It's the dark red, so I'm actually going to use that here as well and push that through here because I think that it might show the teeth marks from the gears a little bit better, and then we can use that to tell whether we're biting into the filament too much, right? Yeah, I think we're looking pretty good. So here I'll see if I can get the camera to focus on this. I don't know if you're going to be able to see. I'll try to catch the light, but there are some very light tooth marks here on our filament from that extruder gear. So I think that that is pretty good amount of tension and spacing and all of that. Looks pretty good. And just looking up through the filament path from the bottom here, I can see kind of the edge of both of those gears and where they would grab onto the filament as well. So that's looking quite good. All right, let's move forward. So next are all of the cooling fans, it looks like. And we've got 3 of them in total. These are the part cooling fans, and then this one here is for the hot end. And I guess what we need to do is just make sure we orient these correctly. So this one goes in this side. In this direction, we want the open end where it's going to be blowing down toward the bottom of the tool head here. And we just slide these down into place, I guess. Yeah, they snap nicely into place. So that's very good. Oh, one other thing I noticed, I was checking these ahead of time. Again, because this kit comes with nicely labeled wires, these two say part cooling fan, PCF on them, and then this one says HEF for hot end fan, which is really good because I think in a minute we're going to have all these wires basically running out the same area, and it would be, I would have had to label these for sure to make sure that I plug them into the right places on our little breakout board once we get there. So it's nice that they've done that for me so that I don't have to. All right, this is our hot end fan, and we are going to put it this way and just, I guess, slide it down into place down here. Simple enough. Yeah, it's going to look nice from the front too. Cool. And then this wire, let me get some tweezers because we might need them for running wires. I think this wire is meant to just run here through this path. Like that. It looks like they've made an indentation in the plastic part so that when we slide this other fan down, it's not gonna, that wire's not gonna get in the way. Yeah, so we've got our third fan here. This one is going this way. Yeah, so this wire is gonna have to just slide into this little channel as we go here. This way. And we'll just slide this down and make sure that we're not pinching any wires as we go. Yeah, that looks good. And yeah, both of these are coming out the same channel, so it's nice that they're labeled so I know which one's which. And that doesn't seem like it's quite snapped into place all the way down, so let's just kind of maneuver this around and press it a little more. Yeah, see, it's not lined up with the opening here. It's a little bit shifted this way still. So I believe that it's maybe run into a wire down below and it isn't pushing down all the way. Yeah, it's still not seating correctly. I would like that to make sure that it's nice and lined up. So what I'm going to do is see if I can maneuver this back out. And yeah, there we go. I'm pretty sure it's this right here that's getting in the way. So what I'm gonna do is just adjust this a bit and try again. Yep, I felt that go down into place much better that time. All right, and we're looking good. Okay. So next, we have our stepper motor for our extruder. They want us, it looks like, to put this on with the wires coming out the top. So we're going to put it this way. And they want us to connect that in from the front here with, I believe, 2 M3x10s, although they have them on 2 separate pages here, yes. So this side, I guess we can go ahead and tighten it down somewhat. Not super tight, right? But at least enough. This side is kind of the pivot point, and then the other side's going to be loose so that we can adjust the meshing of this gear off of this motor with our extruder gearing that we've already put in place. They do note in the instructions as well that these 2 screws we're putting in right now extend past, like they go all the way through these areas here on the extruder motor and they extend past it, and that's on purpose because we're going to put some standoffs on the other end of them, or on the other side of them, to connect some other parts in a little while. This one's actually a little awkward because the tensioning screw here is sitting kind of in the way. Alright, so this one I'm not tightening all the way down. This one I'm not making super tight, but I'm tightening it down enough. So our motor has a little bit of play to it now, just like so. So that we can adjust how the teeth are meshing, which I think is probably what we're going to do next. Yes, it is. Alright, so loosen our latch. It says here in the instructions that I should get my bifocals. Alright, so what they want us to do here is we're adjusting the amount that the teeth off the motor overlap with the teeth here on our main extruder gear. So I can turn this with my thumbnail here and I can feel it catching the motor more and more as I bring the motor down this way. And the idea is to leave at least a little bit of backlash so that the gears aren't binding up with one another. So that feels pretty good. Then we can go ahead and tighten this down. And I suppose tighten the other side as well. And then we're going to just double check it again to make sure I'm happy with how that feels, how that rotation's working. Yeah, that actually seems quite good. So all of this to me feels more like an art than a science, as far as like, there's no objective way to know that I've got those meshed correctly or that I've got the right tension on this or whatever. It's more just kind of trial and error and how it feels. So yeah, I don't know that I can give any more advice or anything on how to get that done just right, but yeah, just kind of play with it. And then if it turns out that it's you know, binding too much or whatever, you'll notice when you start printing, and you could always then take the tool head back off and adjust it then. So on the next page of the instructions, we can choose our hot end, except that we're not choosing one because our kit came with this one here, the Voron Revo. And I already have the 0.4 nozzle that it came with installed here. We're going to be swapping this out, just so you know, in the future for a 0.25, which is the smallest Revo nozzle that they provide. Again, because we're trying to print with as much precision as we can. But for now, I've just got this in here because it'll hold everything in place while we build this, right? So what we're going to do is go ahead and mount this in here with M3x8s. Just 4 of them down from the top. Alright, so there, that's mounted in there nice and solid. They want us to put our PTFE tube down here and feed it, you know, as far down into the extruder there, or into the hot end there as it will go. So that's like that. And then for the other end of it, we need to cut this at 6 millimeters. And I believe that the tool, yes, here on the next page they show us, this printed tool that we used for spacing our motor pulleys and a couple of other things has a 6 millimeter thickness here. So if we feed this down over the end of our PTFE tube, it's a nice, fairly tight fit, which is probably good. Then if we cut flush at the top of this, that should give us the 6 millimeters we need. And so I'm going to grab my hobby knife. And yesterday when we used this knife, I noticed that the blade was not very sharp, and so I've actually fixed that. I've replaced the blade, so I'm just going to cut this flush here. Nice smooth cut. And of course it pulled out with our tool, so let's grab this out of here and feed it back into there. Very nice. Alright, so that should be our nice flush cut. I'm just kind of eyeballing it. It looks like it's got a bit of an angle, so I'm just going to shave off this side of it just ever so slightly to level that out. Yes, that looks good. Alright, and so now we can insert this up into here. It should just slide up in place, and our PTFE tube that we just put in goes up into that hole, which is the filament path. Just going to use some tweezers here to align that, make sure it's good and lined up, and then we'll slide this up into place. There we go. And then from the front side, 2 M3x35s feed all the way through. So these are going through these 2 holes as well in the top of our hot end mount back here. And it looks like, just based on my printed plastic part, that they're not going to want to slide in, so I'm going to have to thread them in. And I'm just threading them in far enough that they start to come out the back here, because I think we're going to screw them into the mounting plate that we've already got on our printer. So I don't want them threaded out too far, just far enough to start to grab those heat set inserts when we go to put that in place. All right, on our next page, we have the beginnings of going ahead and mounting this onto the printer. So I guess I'm gonna need to move a few things out of the way here. And then we will work on that. Like so. All right, so this sits on top of here, and these two screws that we've just threaded most of the way through just go into there. Now at this point I need to decide whether there's enough clearance from the amount of belt that I've left protruding from this thing. I may have to trim those down even more. Let's see. No, it seems like that's actually going to sit flush without trimming the belts anymore. Let me just double check on that as best I can, looking from all angles. Yeah, I think we're actually okay with the tiny amount. I've left like about a tooth and a half on each belt there, and that seems like it's gonna be okay. Cool. All right, so let's see if we can tighten this down. All right, that's good. It feels solid. I'm actually shaking the entire desk trying to move this around off of its normal axis of movement, so that's real good. All right, what is next? We have one screw that comes in from the backside. So not sure I can get you a good angle of this, but up here underneath the extruder, maybe like this. Yeah, there's a little hole right there. And we've got an M3 by 16 that comes in from the back here. And now, on page 186 in the official Voron documentation, our LDO build guide says we should stop following these instructions and switch over to their own guide that they have for the pico-bilical kit that they included with this printer. And so what we're going to do, instead of the standard tool head backing here, they've got their own PCB. It looks like this, which has, it looks like a 12-pin connection up at the top of it that will lead back to our electronics compartment, and then it's got connectors for all the different things that are here on the print head itself. So we can plug all those things in here, and we'll just have the one cable connecting back to the electronics. And so in order to install this correctly, they have their own guide. I will be looking at that on my screen. I can't pop it up for you, but it's fairly simple. I will link to it down in the description of this video. If you're following along, you can go find it there. And I've already printed the parts as well that we need for this. So this should be fairly simple to do. All they ask us to do is to grab these two metal spacers that they provided and thread them on here onto these two screws that are already coming out the back of our extruder motor. Very good. And then we've got this printed part, which should now just fit right onto here. So it lines up with these two spacers we just inserted, plus these two spots down here on the carriage. They want two M3 by 8s, and we can use them to attach this down here on the bottom. We can mount our PCB on the back of this. So this just sits here. It sits at a weird kind of angle, which is why this mounting piece is important, I guess. It gives you the correct angle, and there's a little triangular indentation at the top of the board here that fits in with that little triangle there. So everything lines up perfectly. And then we use these plus these two printed spacers that have a weird angle to them because of this thing sitting at an angle. So the idea is, I guess, that you feed this through the spacer and then the screw head will sit flush, assuming that you get this angled spacer turned the right way as you screw it in place. All right, that is looking pretty good. And then the question is, should we go ahead and just plug all of these cables in place? And I believe the answer to that should be yes, we should. Because we're not going to need them again, or we're not going to get special instructions, I don't think. So part cooling fan, and these are nicely labeled here on the back side of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just plug all of these in right now, and then we'll go back and see what we can do about cable management. So hot end fan goes, let me see, this is a part cooling fan over here. Hot end fan goes right there. So like that. Then we've got the extruder motor is this 4-pin connector down there. Is that going to be in the way of anything if I just plug it in now? I think not. Very nice. And then we should have two things coming from our hot end itself. They're down here. I don't know which direction I want to try to run them up and around. Let's go this way. And so this is the thermistor, which goes here. And then these two will screw, this is for the heater itself. For the extruder, this will go into here. So looking at all of that from back here and from the point of view of clearance around this rail here to make sure that none of these wires are rubbing, I think I want to tie everything together like right there. And then this one on the other side, I'm not sure. It's actually long enough. I could run it down and around and up this way. I think that's what I'm going to do. So this is maybe hard to see on camera, but this wire here for this other side hot end fan, I'm going to run it back underneath so it comes up where all these other wires do on this side of the extruder. And then I'm going to tie them all just like that, I think, to get them out of the way. And that will be as clean of a look as we can possibly make, I think. While keeping everything clear of rubbing on, you know, any of the belts or the axis as things move around. So yeah, that'll be fairly simple to do. And the nice thing is this is all self-contained, right? So we can now remove this print head from the rail if we need to. And in the future, we'll just have the one cable plugged in the top here that goes back to the electronics compartment. All right, so there we are. Let me get you a view of the front of this guy. These wires aren't obviously plugged in yet, but I'm going to take care of that shortly. And yeah, he's looking pretty good. So that is going to be the end of this episode. I will go clean up the wires on my own. And then the next time, I think we're going to come back and start working on the electronics, right? Because this thing is basically ready to print at this point from a mechanical point of view. We just have to install the control boards and do the software configuration so that we can get this thing to print its first print. So yeah, next time will be electronics, which go, I believe, in this compartment that doesn't exist yet that we're going to create back here in the back side of the printer. So all the electronics will mount into here, and that's what we'll do next time. In the meantime, I hope you have a good day, and I will see you for the next one.